So if fire suppression makes fires worse, then why do we do it? Well, wildfires are big business. And cousin, business is a boomin'. When you hear that the California wildfires cost billions of dollars, it's not like they just burned a stack of money. That money went somewhere. Every helicopter in the sky costs a lot of money. In fact, it's around 10 grand an hour. And the air tankers are even more. Every retardant drop from a VLAT costs north of $65,000 per bust. And they drop that shit like the expiration date is tomorrow. The Forest Service spends nearly $100 million a year on retardant. And it all goes to one private company. Fire aviation costs millions of dollars every day in peak fire season, and many of the ships are contracted out by private companies. They even have a 747. Thousands of miles of hose get used up every year. In 2020, they had a nationwide fire hose shortage. Every lunch, every Gatorade, marked up to government cost. The California Department of Corrections has a great racket. They use cheap prison labor to manufacture their equipment, but they bill at government cost. Why? Well, why not? It's not their money. It's yours. And it's not just the suppression costs. Destruction means transactions. How much money does a hardware store make off your house if it's just sitting there year after year? Well, how much money do you think they make when it burns to the ground? You think the car salesmen are distraught that they have to sell thousands of brand new cars every year because the ones they just sold you all burned up in a wildfire? Every burned out car means a new one is sold. Every leveled house means a new one is built. Contractors, labor, permits, building supplies, furniture, wiring, utilities. Every power pole has to be replaced by men working overtime with hazard pay. The wildfire industrial complex is a $12 billion a year industry in California alone. That's bigger than porn. And in a way, it is porn. Media clowns flock to wildfires like moths to a flame. They plant themselves in front of a raging headfire for the cool shot, and then have to run for their lives when it outflanks them. They overhype the intensity of the incidents for their fire porn, staging shots to heighten the drama for their unsuspecting viewers, doing multiple takes to get the ominous tone just right. Oftentimes, you'll find more fire pornographers than firefighters. And they cheer when homes burn up and are visibly disappointed when a neighborhood is saved. They really only profit when your life has been destroyed on camera. Sometimes the firefighters like to tease the pornographers by pretending to do some hotlining, to trick them into racing over and raising their cameras. Talking heads with all the gravitas of an underwear model will cry out loud that everything you are seeing is unprecedented. It's not. There is no new kind of magical fire behavior that didn't exist before.
We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
It might help if I unmute my mic. That's where I'm to a killer start. Good evening, everybody. You are part of an A/B test. So I wanted to see the difference between attendance in the mornings and in the evenings, see when you guys prefer to do it live. So this is the evening test. The theme of today's stream. Oh, sorry, brother. The theme of today's stream are the feds wasting money on wildfires. Now, why am I open to this? Why am I open to this tweet when I ask that question? If the feds are wasting money on wildfires? Well, when you look at this, clearly our federal resources have time during their day while fires are raging in California to be not only posting on Twitter, but playing around with drones. What the fuck is this, dude? You were playing around with toys. You've got this massive DJI drone filled with ping pong balls. What the fuck are you doing? Well, as it turns out, this is actually work. And this is good work. And this is actually really efficient work. So if anything, this is saving the feds money. But we do have to discuss, why is wildfire so expensive in California? This was a question that I got after a previous live stream. And this is something that's actually, this is a good question to raise. California is not only the most expensive place to fight fire, but it's also the most expensive place to prevent fire. And I think it's tempting for people to say, well, it's just because it's California. It's not just because it's California and everything is more expensive. That's part of it. But there are other details to that. But the other thing we have to ask ourselves, is it actually true? Is it actually more expensive to fight fire in California? We're going to dig into that. The answer may surprise you, or will it? So looking at Ella Slacker playing with his toys. I'm sorry, dude. I'm not trying to single you out. But this is actually a good use of resources. So what we're looking at is we are looking at this, much fabled 36-hour firing operation. Now that sounds really fancy, but I will remind you that on the Bobcat fire in 2020, we had a whatever 24 times 6 is, that many hour continuous firing operation on the Bobcat fire with all of the Angeles National Forest hotshot crews running cycles, burning everything they could, and successfully stopping that fire from burning up like billions of dollars of infrastructure on Mount Wilson. And then they did it again with the Eaton Fire. So this isn't necessarily out of the ordinary. It's just kind of a BFD right now because there's sort of nothing else going on in California. So this is the Gifford Fire, and they've done a really good job so far with this fire. What they're doing right now is they're trying to seal up this problematic northwest end of the fire that's giving them some headaches. Let me see if I can. It's this area in Division Hotel. The Division Hotel, Division Kilo break, along with a little bit of Division Echo, is burning in the Garcia Wilderness. This is an area that does not have fire history. So it's a little bit problematic here. So what they're going to do, because of the way the terrain is around here, it's like the Vladi Divac neck fuel model out there. There's no stopping that fire up there. Okay, there's just no stopping it. So what they got to do is they got to put in line where it's more advantageous, down in the flatter areas in the foothills. So that way they can actually cut a few blades of grass. And by blades, I mean dozer blades, not blades of grass. Dozer blades in grass, and light everything else in between it on fire. Now, Scott Safechuck, who wins the award for, like, his name is straight out of Central Casting for exactly what I would want to call a fire PIO. Scott Safechuck. Dude, does it get any better than that? Like if I were making a movie about, like a cartoonish movie like The Incredibles about wildland firefighters, I would name the public information officer Scott Safechuck. Tells you to be safe with cigarettes. So he posted some video footage of the beginning of this massive firing operation that's wrapping around the Pozo area, up in that upper corner of the fire. And as you can see, it's relatively simple. What are they doing exactly? They're just burning shit. Because, of course, this is what works to stop wildfires. Now, this is going to be a point that we're going to want to remember for later on in the show, because I've got a news segment that I want to show you that, oh my God, it just raised my hackles in a way that I can't even describe. Fire works. Getting rid of fuels works. And you'll notice that this is all that they're doing. They've got bulldozers and they've got dudes with drip torches. Now, introducing this newer element here. What is this guy doing? What this drone is doing with these ping pong balls, these are PSD balls. Was it plastic sphere dispenser? These are tiny, they're basically ping pong balls, and they have potassium permanganate used for lighting prescribed burns from the air. So now, instead of using, we used to use like helitorches, and we still do to a certain degree, A helitorch is like a big copter carrying a big drip torch at the end of a chain, and they would just drip fire over the forest here. Firefighters on the ground, they will use Very pistols to shoot. Basically, they're like flare guns that would shoot up into that area to try to get depth to their firing operations. Or they'll just simply walk a drip torch up there. They'll throw these little bombies in there. But being able to use this drone, not only is it safer, right? Because you're not risking any pilots, you're not risking that huge drip torch like snagging on a tree. You can be very, very precise with this thing. And what it does is it just pierces a little hole and it creates a chemical reaction inside these plastic balls right before they're dropped. And then they just start burning whatever's around. They can be very precise with it and put it in these tight corners and do precise lines on it. This is what they're doing right now. So I've seen some pretty cool video showing the operations, the aerial ignitions, and it's really fascinating. I hope that someday they do like a news segment on this, because I genuinely believe that this UAS stuff is really going to dominate fire. And you know, when it comes to flying on wildfires, what's the first rule? What is the first rule of flying? Hopefully Daniel Firecopter can answer this, since he is himself a firecopter. There's one rule that is the predicate of every mission involving aviation. And it begins with a question: is this flight necessary? Right? Because flying over wildfire is inherently dangerous. It is exceedingly dangerous. And so it really does have to be a necessary flight in order for it to be worth it. Okay. And so this is just sort of a general protocol. Is this flight necessary? Well, with drones, what we're really risking is, $20,000 worth of equipment. Okay. Now that may seem like a lot of money, but that's the equivalent of 2 hours of flight time on a helicopter. And you're not going to risk anybody's life unless that thing falls on somebody's head. Now, depending on who's piloting this thing, do we trust him to not crash it? Is he even piloting it? And that's the real question. But anyway, these firing operations are ongoing. I have very high hopes that they are going to be wrapping up this fire in short order. It is now over 125,000 acres. So my prediction of it being over 120 came true, thank God. So I don't look like an idiot. Now, on to the expenses on these fires. This is the SIT report, the situation report out of NIFC. This is going to give us a sense of how much money are we really spending on these fires. Now, there's a lot here. There are a few areas where we have big fires. Colorado's got a big 116,000 acre fire. Arizona obviously has the Dragon Bravo fire that burned through the Grand Canyon. Not through the canyon itself, but around 143,000 acres. That was a big one. A lot of structure loss on that one. And then, of course, in California, we've got the Gifford fire, which, these totals aren't precisely up to date, but 120,000 acres. Now, did I create this? I did. I consolidated some of the primary big fires into this spreadsheet and just ranked them, just so it's a little more organized than that SIT report that we're looking at. Helislacker, is this flight necessary? Of course I can rely. You're that nerd in the class who always knows the right answers, and you're always raising your hand, even though everyone's like, dude, we know that you already know the answer. Let someone else answer it. But Helislacker is 100% right. Is this flight necessary? We care about our pilots. Now, these are the big, large fires. And of course, what do you notice right out of the gate? California is the most expensive. It is the most expensive. Now, why is that? Well, at first glance, you can see just on personnel numbers alone, the Gifford fire has 4,300 people on it. It has 103 crews. That is an insane amount of crews. But what does this tell you? You have far more crews than you have helicopters. Okay? And now you have more engines than you have crews. But a crew is going to have typically like 20 to 23 people. An engine is going to have 3 to 4 people. So the the biggest share of your personnel is coming from your hand crews. And what do? They get rid of fuels. This is going to be a theme tonight, getting rid of fuels. Okay. Now, the engines are there primarily at this point to support getting rid of fuels, right? So when they're doing a big firing operation, there's a ton of planning that goes into this. A lot of times they're going to try to leverage roads. They're going to try to create dozer line. You have to create a line where it's like, okay, this is where the fire is going to start. And as it burns away from this line that we've established, it picks up in intensity, right? So it's really small at the beginning. It's not going to jump over this line. And as it burns away from us towards the main head of fire, it's going to build that intensity. And that's why they want to get more depth in there. They want to make sure that that heat is closing in on that main head of fire. And they want to take out as much of that fuel as they can in between their line and the main head of fire. Reduce it, like the bigger the depth of your firing operation, the more likely it's going to hold, and that head of fire isn't going to throw spots over the line. So it's just about drawing a line in the sand, quite literally, and saying, this is where we want it to stop. Okay. And everything else in the way gets burned up. And that's totally fine because it's just plants. They'll grow right back. Now, looking at this chart, you'll notice a few things. The Gifford Fire is the most expensive fire at $84.3 million. This is a lot of money. There are only 4 structures burned. And I do not believe these are homes. These are probably little outbuildings. They might be outhouses on the LPF, right? These are long drop toilets in the middle of nowhere. So we don't really care about that structure loss. It's not that significant. However, it's costing us $84.3 million to just let all this stuff burn up because we have a ton of people on this fire. Now, the Dragon Bravo fire has the most structure loss, and these are very significant structures, including was the Grand Canyon Lodge up on the North Rim. This was a huge headline when all those structures burned up, and is really devastating, frankly. These are historic buildings. That fire is 20,000 acres bigger than the Gifford Fire. It burned up a ton of structures. It did have a ton of personnel. They wound down some of it, and yet it's $24 million less than the Gifford Fire. How is this possible? I'm curious if you guys have any theories as to why fighting fire in California is so fucking expensive. Now, look, a part of it is, yes, fuel. Fuel is going to be more expensive. I'm sure food is more expensive in California as well. You do have a ton of personnel on this. That comes down to, okay, why do you have so much personnel? Why do we have so much personnel on California fires? Well, part of the reason is you have tons of human beings living in California. And 40% of those human beings live in the WUI. They live in the wildland urban interface. So in California, we have probably the worst case of, at least in fire country, mixing human beings out into the wildlands, interfacing with flammable material. So that means, as we've discussed in previous live streams, this puts firefighters in a really tough spot where they have to try to fight fire where they don't want to fight fire, where it's not advantageous to fight fire. Now, the Gifford Fire is giving you an example of what it looks like when the Forest Service is allowed to just do what their mission is, which is dealing with protecting plants. That's quite literally it. They're a wildfire agency. They're not an all-hazard agency, even though they're left to do these things, right? They're expected to respond to medicals. They're doing medicals all over the Angeles Crest Highway, but that's not their job. So they're constantly being pushed to do things that aren't really in their job description or in the ideal set of circumstances as it pertains to their mission, which is dealing with the wildlands. So traditionally, you would let these fires burn, and this is what they do in other states. So in Montana, they're not going to throw 4,300 people on a fire burning in the middle of a forest. They are just going to let it burn to where it's easy to pick it up. They're just going to do a big box and say, dude, let this thing rip until it gets to this river. We'll set it on fire around the river and we'll seal this thing in. That's it. Okay. So they're not going to be spending $84 million on fires in Montana. Here's a problem. What is the Pomus fire? Do you guys see this? Here's the wrinkle. Was it the sixth one down? Pomus Fire in Washington. It's only 3,472 acres. They only have 320 personnel. They have 0 structures burned. $57.2 million. God, I feel like Dr. Evil. $57.2 million for a fucking 3,000 acre fire in Washington. What? This blew my mind. I'm still not fully convinced that that's not a typo. Let's see if we can find that here. So you have a 3,000 acre fire costing $57 million. How is this even possible? Now, as it turns out, part of the reason why this is possible is it's in a very remote area. Okay. So this fire is in a very remote area. It's basically impossible to get to. And so they're relying on helicopters, but dude, this is almost inexplicable. How is this costing $57 million for a 3,000 acre fire? And if it's in the middle of nowhere, why are we bothering with it? That's the other question. Now, I understand the principle of you got to keep it small because if it gets too big, then it's like, all right, we can't stop it. And now it's descending into the areas where we don't want it. But I got to be honest, man. We should maybe be questioning why the fuck we are doing this. $57 million to attack a 3,000 acre fire in the middle of nowhere. How much longer does Washington have to burn, right? Days are already getting shorter, which means your burn window is already getting shorter. Now, you can get some nasty fires in September. You can get some nasty weather conditions in September. So I don't want to downplay that. But I think we should probably be, instead of asking like, why is fire so expensive in California? Why is it so expensive in Washington? What are we doing? Like, is there some important timberland that's necessary to protect? I don't get this. So that to me is the bigger concern. But all that said, we have to wonder. And we opened this live stream with that segment in Hotshot about the wildfire industrial complex. There is a grift associated with wildfire. And like we've said, Lockheed Martin is getting into this space. So it's not just about drones. We've got all kinds of new stuff coming. We've got AI tools coming. Everyone seems to be talking about fire tech, fire tech, fire tech. There are autonomous helicopters now that Rain is working on. So there is a lot of venture capital going into the wildfire space, and we're going to see these things evolve. And this brings us back to Palisades Fire and the Eaton Fire. Are we sick of this yet? Why Los Angeles was unprepared for this fire. Part of the wildfire industrial complex is the media. And we have to discuss this. I saw a news segment, and this was primarily on the Eaton Fire. Now, shall we discuss a little bit why the Eaton Fire happened? Or should we watch the news segment first? I've asked this question before on multiple live streams because I have a little insight into what happened in Eaton Canyon. And so far, none of the people at the Washington Post, none of the people who I've seen on Twitter have shown any interest in asking why was there no prescribed fire done in Eaton Canyon. Now, a lot of you guys may know Edgar McGregor. He's got a great account on Twitter, and he lives in Altadena. And so he was providing a lot of insight into that fire. More importantly, he was showing how overgrown Eaton Canyon was prior to the fire. And there are some posts from him warning like, hey man, this is ready to burn. It's stuff that you hear from me all the time. But he called it in the exact spot where it was a problem. The question is, why was that never burned? Did the Angeles National Forest have a burn plan for Eaton Canyon? Had they been wanting to burn that for years? And were they prevented from doing that burning? Who prevented them from doing it? Does anyone seem interested in answering this question? It doesn't seem like it. So when it comes to the media's role in the wildfire industrial complex, obviously they make a ton of money off of their fire coverage. They make a ton of money off of disaster coverage. And the thing about wildfires is they're sort of like military campaigns. Like we literally call them campaign fires when they go on for more than 4 or 5 days. It is this ongoing gift that keeps on giving, right? A hurricane, when it comes through, they've got maybe 1 or 2 days of prep where they've got their weather guys out there. And when the storm surge comes in and the winds come in, And then they've got maybe 2 or 3 days of covering the destruction. They'll maybe be able to milk a week out of it. But when it comes to wildfires, they can milk months out of this stuff. And the problem is the media is doing a great disservice to the public. And they're setting us up for a repeat of everything. I want to show you this news segment that I found that made me want to pull my hair out. It's going to end up making me look like Gavin Newsom, who has gone extremely gray. You guys notice this? Just as an aside, I think Spencer Pratt has aged Gavin Newsom by pestering him so much and so effectively. Look how white he's gotten. I've told you that the Palisades fire is going to be his undoing. This image from the left is from, I think like 2 weeks after the Palisades fire, some little like press conference that he did. And this was just the other day. That is rapid onset whitening. Gavin the Gray. All right. Anyway, on to the news segment that's going to turn me as white as Gavin Newsom.
Firefighters fight these flames in LA. They are also fighting misinformation. Some claim that these fires could have been prevented through fuel management techniques like prescribed burns. I want to go ahead and bring in ABC 10's Jeannie New.
Can you already tell? Can you already tell where this is going? With an intro like that, they start with misinformation has been spreading. We all know what this is. Oh gosh, do we lose connection? Gavin Gray is stressing. Thank you, Firecopter. All right, hopefully we're back up. We had a little disconnect on the stream. The media doesn't like it when I talk about how awful they are. So they start this segment. I'll just replay it just in case you guys missed it.
Firefighters fight these flames in LA. They are also fighting misinformation.
The firefighters, these poor firefighters, they're fighting misinformation. These stupid peasants think that if we got rid of some of the fuels, it might have helped with the fires. You stupid peasants. Let's do a hit piece to make sure you guys never believe that. This is unbelievable stuff, man. I'm going to try to let this play without interrupting it, but this segment pissed me off so much I may not be able to do it. So pray for me.
Some claim that these fires could have been prevented through fuel management techniques like prescribed burns. I want to go ahead and bring in ABC 10's Jeannie Nguyen. She's been asking fire officials and fire experts tonight if that's true.
Well, Alex, there's
fire experts. Guys, the fire experts are coming. Remember, whenever the news trots out the experts, you know you're going to get 100% pure information.
a lot of finger pointing over the severity of these fires, and many claim the state is not doing enough prescribed burning. But after talking with fire officials at the federal and state level, there is a lot more decision making that goes into this kind of field management.
In fiscal year 23-24, we treated 106,000 acres.
In an effort to curb wildfires, California.
Did you guys catch that? You guys who've been watching me, what did I tell you about that word treated? They love using that fucking word, and now you will never unhear it. They say treated because that means they're not doing prescribed fire. They're doing a bunch of other things that they lump in with prescribed fire so they can lie to you about how much they're actually doing. And that number was paltry. Where were we?
Fiscal year 23-24, we treated 106,000 acres.
In an effort to curb wildfires, California aims to treat 1 million acres of land in the state each year. CAL FIRE plays a major role in these field reduction projects along with other agencies.
500,000 acres from the forest, the federal areas, and then 500,000 between CAL FIRE and then all of our local response areas. And to divide it even further, CAL FIRE's goal is to treat 100,000 acres every year.
CAL FIRE, the state's fire agency, says it met its goal for the previous fiscal year. This comes after Republican lawmakers criticized the state on Monday, saying California is not meeting its field reduction goals as fires continue to burn in Southern California, claiming lives and property.
This is true. California is not meeting its needs. This is objectively true. Now, they did not fact check that CAL FIRE guy on the amount of actual prescribed fire they're doing or treatment, where he laid out the goals. The goal was to do 1 million acres a year, 500,000 between the feds, 500,000 between state and LRA. They're not remotely close to that. Like not even remotely close to that. But of course, these news outlets, they're completely unprepared for this. They don't bother to do any research. They don't care. And it's like they're only there to do the bidding of power. This segment gets worse. This is just the intro. It gets so much worse. And I'm going to get in trouble for what I say about this next portion.
There was a commitment to doing 500,000 acres a year in treatment. There was a partnership actually between the state and the federal government that the governor was proud to announce when it came out. We have gotten nowhere near meeting those goals.
The U.S. Forest Service is part of the state's partnership, and right now, part of the Eaton Fire is burning in their jurisdiction. As of October 2024, U.S. Forest says statewide it has done 3,500 acres of prescribed burns and more than 5,000 acres of mechanical treatments. The Forest Service says weather has played a big factor in trying to clear fuel in Southern California.
Southern California has not seen conditions appropriate for prescribed burning since last spring. So certainly we are not in any kind of condition in the southern half of the state to be looking at those prescribed fires now.
When asked if anything could have been done to prevent the destructive spread of the Southern California fires,
there's nothing. Let's just start with that. The condition.
There's nothing. Let's just start with that. God, dude. All right. On previous streams, we've talked about how government loves your conspiracy theories. They love when you focus on climate change. Why? Because it distracts you from realizing that it's just plain old government and bureaucratic incompetence that is the biggest threat to your life. They love using all this extra bullshit as a scapegoat. Here she is saying, flat out, unequivocally, there's nothing we can do. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We just have to accept that we have to have 33 people die. We have to accept $250 billion of damage. We just have to accept that because there's nothing you can do. Nothing, really. We just went over these firing operations on the Gifford fire. If there's nothing you can do and fuel management doesn't work, why the fuck do we do it? Why is Helislacker up there with a drone dropping ping pong balls in the middle of nowhere? It's to stop the fucking fire because that shit actually works. I'm so sick of these people trying to give themselves an out and pretend like, oh, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. It's just climate change. We can't deal with it because of climate. It's just too much. We can't do our jobs.
We are not in any kind of condition in the southern half of the state to be looking at those prescribed fires.
See, and they always have an excuse to not do prescribed fire. The conditions just aren't right. So are they never right? Are they never right? So we just have to accept that we're never going to fucking do this stuff. I am so sick of all these fucking excuses. Guys, this fire is inevitable. So you can't just like delay doing the prescribed fire and then think, oh, well, we'll just wait. We'll wait until the weather gets good and then we'll do it. It's like, guys, the fire is going to get like every year you have a fire season. And it's going to show up whether you want it to or not. And so would you rather roll the dice with how Mother Nature does it? Is that what we're going to do? According to the governor himself, we showed this. We showed this before. California's landscapes are among the most naturally fire dependent on Earth. This work product is from the governor's office. We have a fire dependent ecosystem. In it, the governor's panel says the public is beginning to recognize that California can no longer eliminate fire or smoke from the landscape. Instead, our best option is to deliberately engage with fire in order to proactively decide when, where, and how it shapes our landscape and environment. Yet here we are. We have this stooge in the Forest Service
fight these flames in LA,
who is claiming, well, the weather conditions are just not right for prescribed fire. Okay, so then we just never do it. I understand that, yeah, the weather conditions are a little dicey for prescribed fire this year. But I mean, the wildfire is going to be here anyway. So is that same weather not dicey for wildfire? So we're only going to allow wildfire to enter the landscape and not prescribed fire, right? So we're not going to do it on our terms. We're going to let Mother Nature decide. How does that work out? Well, we already saw that with Palisades and Eaton. I am so sick of these people making excuses for inaction. And that's all that I hear from this lady.
Let's just start with that.
Let's
The
just start with that.
conditions that we saw in Southern California last Tuesday were in above the 99.99th percentile of severity.
Environmental experts at Stanford University agree climate plays a major role in fire risks and management.
Even a large-scale fire break probably wouldn't have been effective in keeping the wildfire out of the community.
What is wrong with these people? This is a fire expert saying even a large-scale fire break wouldn't have been effective at keeping fire out of these communities. Bullshit. Why do we even do this work? Why are they doing this on the Gifford fire? If fire breaks don't work, why do we do them? They worked on the Silverado fire, which legitimately had 80-mile-per-hour winds on it. How many times do I have to play that segment from my film? Do I have to do it again? I'm so sick of hearing this shit. Listen to the excuses that they make.
California fires.
There's nothing. Let's just start with that. The conditions that we saw in Southern California last Tuesday were in above the 99.99th percentile of severity.
Environmental experts at Stanford University agree climate plays a major role in fire risks and management.
Even a large-scale fire break probably wouldn't have been effective in keeping the wildfire out of the communities. And once the communities are burning, the spread is from home to home, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the forest management.
While fires may be difficult to prevent, fire officials and scientists say homeowners can help minimize the spread by hardening their homes and property.
So far, this.
Hold on. So they'll tell you fire breaks don't work. Getting rid of fuels does not work. But you, peasant, you get rid of the fuels around your property. That'll work. Does this not drive you people crazy? Am I the only one? Daniel Firecopter, July had perfect conditions for prescribed burns. That is 100% correct. Did you see how little fire activity we had in California in July? I don't care how bad the fires were in January. The conditions in July, everyone was just sitting there with nothing to do. We could have gotten so much prescribed fire done. Everybody was sitting there. And right now, we're in the middle of dirty August. All we have is the Gifford fire. And what are they doing? They're doing a massive firing operation, which, of course, is going to protect, I guess, some wilderness. But we're not going to do prescribed fire. We're not going to do tactical firing operations around communities. We're only getting it done around the fucking Garcia wilderness. So in one breath, they will tell you that fuel breaks don't work. But fuel breaks don't work when they do them, but fuel breaks work when you do them, peasant. When you get rid of the fuels around your home, that works. But if we get rid of the fuels around your community, that doesn't work. That doesn't do anything. Even though I showed, I cannot tell you how grateful I am that I was right here on the Silverado fire to capture this. When we had 85-mile-per-hour winds pushing this fire into Orchard Hills. And then it hit their fuel break because it's a newer community and they had this huge fuel break around the community. And all they had were succulents and these spaced out trees, stuff that's not really going to catch on fire. It's certainly not going to carry that kind of a wildfire into the neighborhood. Now, it did spot into some palm trees, but that's something that's easily handled by these guys. Okay, so I'm sorry. Stop pissing on my leg and telling me that it's raining. Fuel breaks work. And if clearing out fuels around your home works for you peasants to do, well, then our community leaders and our politicians, they should be expected to do the same thing around our communities. When we don't have the ability to do it, they should do it. We see here in the Washington Post, vegetation clearings warnings ignored. What's this? Before a home is threatened, experts say one of the few steps homeowners can take to make their property more fire resistant is clearing it of grass and shrubs, removing fuel. My God, dude. In California, people living in risky areas are required to maintain a buffer around their homes, a 5-foot perimeter free of vegetation known as defensible space. Do you guys not see the fucking hypocrisy here? Do you see how they try to shirk their responsibility and put it entirely on you? Now, look, anyone who's watched me for a while knows I'm a huge advocate. I do my flame shame segments where I show how you guys need to take personal responsibility for your property, because clearly these stupid motherfuckers aren't going to do the work. But this is such disingenuous bullshit, and it is such hack journalism. How am I a better journalist than these people? I'm a moron with a mustache in Middle Tennessee, and I am doing a better job reporting on this stuff than the professionals. They will tell you that clearing a buffer around your home works, but clearing a buffer around your community on their property, on fucking state parks like Topanga State Park, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Even though we saw it fucking happen on the Silverado fire in Orange County, where they did proper planning around their community. Now, every community can be retrofitted with this. Just clear out the fucking fuels, right? This drives me fucking crazy. And this insistence that they were dealing with unprecedented weather. Was it unprecedented? The answer may surprise you, or will it? This is the report of the actual wind gusts on January 7th. What do you see here? Now, in Eaton Canyon, we had 70-mile-per-hour winds. That is nasty. That is nasty, nasty, nasty. That's 100% a recipe for disaster. That fire sparked at night with 70-mile-per-hour winds. You are not getting helicopters on that fire. But look at the Palisades, 38 miles per hour. Wait a second. We were told that we had hurricane force gusts on the Palisades fire, and yet the National Weather Service is only reporting 38 miles per hour. Now, that's still howling wind. That's still plenty for a nasty fire, but that is operable. You can have helicopters flying that. And of course, we did. We did. Now, the LADWP, they sort of joined in this stupid chorus where they were trying to pretend as if, oh, well, it's not our fault that the community didn't have water. Aircraft couldn't fly. Really? What's this from Fire Valley Photo? Am I imagining this? Is this AI? That to me looks like a freaking super scooper dumping water all over the Palisades fire. Now you can notice how it does get misted. See how the wind sort of mists that whole thing? And it becomes very difficult to hit your target. But this is well into the fire. You had aircraft on this fire, flying safely. Okay? So it is a complete fucking lie that they had hurricane force winds and unprecedented conditions, the 99.99999 percentile. This is just an excuse that they're using to deflect any scrutiny on what they're doing and their lack of fire mitigation. They're not doing the fucking work, even though the governor himself has talked about the need to get rid of 4.5 million acres, because that's what we used to have. Prior to 1800, approximately 4.5 million acres of the state burned annually. Right now, we have a backlog, right? Because these agencies aren't doing this work, we have a backlog between 10 and 30 million acres in California that need to get burned. This is from the governor's office. This is from a report issued in 2022, okay? So on one hand, they're telling you prescribed fire doesn't work, fuel breaks don't work, except when you do it around your house. But when we do it around the community, I don't know, it doesn't do anything. You can't hold us accountable for that. God, fuck these people. Steve Kerrigan, Orange County is planning a small prescribed fire, shooting for spring of 26, but planner thinks it will be shut down from various agencies, from the Air Quality Management District. This is a huge problem. This is a huge problem. You have air quality management boards that are shutting down prescribed fire. Now, I also think that you have agencies without the will, but as Steve is pointing out, Orange County, which is run by the great Brian Fennessy, who is an exceptional fire chief, they're trying to do something and they think it's going to get shut down. And he's probably right. It probably is going to get shut down, if I had to guess. Save California Hat says, I don't think the tribes were worried about climate change when they were burning the fuck out of the forest. No, they most certainly were not worried about climate change. You know why they were worried about climate change? They were worried about other shit. But also, they saw the benefits of climate change at that point. For the longest time, Yellowstone National Park, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was entombed under 3,000 feet of ice. There was this massive glacier that covered almost all of North America. And Yellowstone was covered in 3,000 feet of ice until climate change melted that stupid fucking glacier. And thank God it got rid of that stupid fucking thing. And now we have Yellowstone, which is the absolute crown jewel, natural wonder of our planet. And we get to enjoy it. But humans were walking around on 3,000 feet of ice before that melted. So this is why I always say, look, obviously the climate is changing, right? And it always changes, and we could be accelerating it. So I'm not even trying to argue that. I just argue over the panic. And I also argue about its relevance to wildfire, because it's not like we had unprecedented winds, and it's not like Santa Ana winds are in any way new. We've always had them. And we've had massive fires going back the longest time, right? Malibu burns like clockwork every 25 years. Like it's the most reliable thing on the planet. And the board of directors of CARB is appointed by whom? Thank you for asking that, Sue Thompson. Who appoints the board of directors for the California Air Resources Board? Who is responsible for appointing the director of California State Parks and Rec? Who's in charge of Topanga State Park? Anyone have a guess? Oh yeah, it's Gavin the Gray. I think this is why he's going gray. I think he recognizes that they really screwed up. They really screwed up. And they keep trying to make all these excuses. They keep trying to make these excuses for why they couldn't deal with this. Los Angeles was unprepared for this fire. Yeah, they really were. They really were. But this idea that like getting rid of fuels around your home works, but getting rid of fuels around your community doesn't work. Like suddenly the magic of fire physics stops when it comes down to bureaucratic failures and it only falls on the homeowner. Drives me nuts. Now, this is why you as a homeowner need to get rid of this stuff, because clearly government is not going to save you. You see what they do. They just make these cowardly excuses and they try to pretend as if they're dealing with unprecedented conditions so they can't do this. Show them this, screenshot this. It's actually kind of hard to find, which is weird. But these were the peak wind gusts on January 7th. So anybody telling you that the Palisades was getting rocked by hurricane force winds, Gavin Newsom tries to pretend there were 100-mile-per-hour gusts. Eaton Canyon did not get 100-mile-per-hour gusts. No fire area got 100-mile-per-hour gusts. That never happened, okay? There were some big gusts. There were some 80-mile-per-hour gusts. And again, like you're talking about upper-level winds. These winds aren't necessarily the winds that were surfacing over the fire, okay? I have been on a bunch of fires where it was advertised as being like 85-mile-per-hour winds, like on the Kincaid Fire. Kincaid Fire had gnarly winds. I do not believe we had 85-mile-per-hour winds surface over that fire. I think you had some ridgetop winds. I think we got hit with 60, maybe 70-mile-per-hour winds. Again, that is more than enough for a massive fire. And there's a reason why we focus a lot more on the Palisades fire than the Eaton Canyon fire. Because, number one, it was all very obvious right at the beginning of the Eaton fire what started that fire. It was power line equipment. Okay, so it's a pretty cut and dry case in terms of liability. Palisades fire is a lot more complex. There are multiple layers. There are multiple layers to this one, right? The Eaton fire ran out of water too. A lot of people don't like to talk about that. And I was cautioning a lot of folks, and Steve Kerrigan actually pointed this out early on during the Palisades fire siege, how part of the reason why you lose water pressure on these fires is when all these homes are burning down, all of their plumbing gets severed. And so they're all gushing water at full tilt, totally unregulated. And so this creates a drop in pressure, and you always end up having the hydrants go dry during this stuff. Now, the big problem is that reservoir being empty. That wasn't necessarily the key factor for the Palisades running out of water. where it was the key factor was early on in the firefight, helicopters could not utilize the helispot at the San Ynez Reservoir or at the Palisades Reservoir because both of them were offline. So they had to fly to 69 Bravo in Malibu, or they had to go to Pepperdine and get water out of the that pool in the garden, in the front yard of Pepperdine. So they had to travel so much farther out of the fire zone to get water. That cut critical time over the fire. And that's when they are the most valuable, right? You can see even the super scoopers on that fire are having a hard time, right? At this point, aircraft is going to struggle to really do anything. Just like the internet is struggling to play a video. Let's see if we can get this going. But early on in the firefight, that's where you have your best chance with aircraft stopping it early, is getting those copters and just beating the shit out of it while it's still small. But because of those reservoirs were offline, the copters had to fly out of the fire area, and that really suffered. Okay, so that was the big issue. The Eaton Fire ran out of water as well. They didn't have empty reservoirs. They dealt with that same problem with physics, where you just had a bunch of homes burning up, all of their water is gushing everywhere, and then you have a bunch of firefighters tapping all the fire hydrants. And there's only so much you can do, right? When you have gravity-fed systems where you have those giant cisterns up on the hill, the trunk lines that feed them simply can't keep up, okay? But the other issue with the Eaton Fire, and part of the reason why we focus more on the Palisades Fire than the Eaton Fire, is the Eaton Fire did see 70-mile-per-hour winds, right? That's a legit firestorm. I've shown you footage from the Palisades Fire where that thing was kind of just spotting into people's ornamental vegetation. And if they had resources in there, they actually could have stopped a lot of those homes from burning. But unfortunately, the streets got clogged up. They had difficulty getting resources in there. And this speaks to another problem on the Palisades Fire, was that people are complaining that they didn't call for evacs early enough. So the evacs went out like around 11:16 in the morning. That fire ignited like right around 10:25. It was reported at 10:28. The response went out sort of almost exactly at 10:30, right? So it wasn't until 45 minutes into the fire that they started initiating the evacuations. Some people are complaining, oh, they didn't give us any time. They screwed us. Here's the thing, man. In a place like the Palisades, let's say we can Monday morning quarterback this, right? So if you have a gnarly red flag day, you've got bad winds, you've got super dry vegetation, and you have an ignition that's completely in alignment where the winds are going to take it straight through the neighborhood and run all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And that's what I was predicting, like right at the outset of the fire. So, okay, let's say because of all that, you issue the evacuation immediately. You're like, as soon as that fire is ignited, we issue the evacuations. That means there is no firefight, right? If you evacuate the highlands and all of the Palisades all at once, as soon as you get an ignition, we already saw that Palisades Drive got completely clogged up and people had to abandon their vehicles. If you evacuated everybody right away, you get that bottleneck down there, you're not going to get any resources going up to actually fight fire. So what they did was they dispatched their engines, and it was 69s, 23s, and 19s, I believe. They went up onto Chastain, and they started doing structure protection on homes right there. They tried to fight the fire. They started to get a sense of, yeah, we're not stopping this. And that's when they issued the evacuations. You can't do both, right? So you either go up and try to fight fire, or you issue immediate evacuations. I think what they tried to do was, hey, let's see if we can corral this thing. They realized we can't get it. Let's start getting people out of here. And once you start doing that, they kind of have to shift to life-saving missions. And then they're dealing with bulldozing the cars out of Palisades Drive. The LAFD has gotten so much scrutiny over this, and I think a lot of it is pretty unfair. But unfortunately, when you see these huge catastrophes, people are going to look for something and someone to blame. And there are people to blame for this, okay? Trust me, the LADWP did a lot of bad things. The governor did a ton of bad things. And even the LAFD did some bad things, but I think that has more to do with what happened on January 1st. I think what they did on January 7th, they did everything that they could. And to a certain degree, there's not a ton that you can do. And the community was fundamentally unprepared for wildfire. And I placed the majority of that blame on Gavin Newsom because it was his state property that completely surrounds the Palisades. And I'm sorry, no matter what these people say, fuels clearance works. They will try to speak with forked tongue. They will try to gaslight you. They will pretend as though clearing vegetation around your home works, but clearing your vegetation around a neighborhood does not work. And that's from a fire expert. I'm so sick of this stuff, man. Sorry, I saw this and it just pissed me off. And I just had to address it. I do not like the way they treat you like you're a moron. And when you raise like legitimate questions about fuels management, they call it like misinformation and disinformation. They're so eager to try to slap that down because I think a part of that means accepting that the people on your team, your political team, might have been at fault for something. The fact that we allow political tribalism to get us to this point where we can't admit fault with the people that we voted for, it gets us into so much trouble. Like this is why our neighborhoods are burning down. Because it's almost like, well, if we start clearing fuels on Topanga State Park, then that's an admission that, yeah, the people running the state fucked up. And I don't want to admit that because I voted for them. That mindset is just going to get more people killed. That's what got people killed in the Palisades. If we had enough people critically evaluating Gavin Newsom's stewardship of state property and actually putting the screws to him like, hey, why does the Topanga State Park that surrounds the entire Palisades look like a fucking rat's nest? Why does the state own a bunch of properties throughout the Palisades, vacant lots that aren't getting cleared? It's like you people are too afraid to put the screws to these people. And then what ends up happening? Everything burns. What I try to do with these streams is I try to give you like little skeleton keys or decoder rings to understand certain gimmicks that the media will do. And these like for lack of a better word, like these trigger words that now that I point them out, you will never unsee them. And what are they? Treatment, right? So when CAL FIRE or Governor Newsom says we treated such and such acres, you know that's just them trying to cover up their lack of prescribed fire. Otherwise, they would say we burned with prescribed fire such and such acres. Instead, they say treated. Okay, they don't do that. What's the other one? When a news outlet says square miles, when they describe a fire in square miles instead of acres, nobody is conveying the area of the fire in anything but acres. Nobody, right? Every IAP, every PIO, every single IR flight, everything, every size up is reported in acres. They will convert it to square miles. An esoteric measurement of area that none of us are familiar with. We're all familiar with acres. We can visualize an acre because our properties are on acreage, right? Nobody can visualize a square mile. We can visualize a linear mile, and that's what they are counting on. They will go out of their way to convert it from an area measurement that we all know to an area measurement that none of us know, just so you conflate it with linear miles. And it gives them the opportunity with square miles, they get to exponentially increase the perceived size of that fire because you're squaring the dimensions. So it just makes it sound that much more dramatic. So instead of saying that it was, 60,000 acres, they can say it was like 40 square miles or whatever it is, and make it seem like it ran for 40 miles because you immediately think of linear miles. We don't visualize square miles as an area measurement. So the other thing that I want you to start noticing is when they say that fuel clearance does not work, because they will lecture you about how you need to clear fuels around your home, but it doesn't work when we do it around the community. Such bullshit. I'm so sick of these people, dude. I hope you guys are as sick of them as I am. And that's why we have to do this stuff. I don't like being on camera. I don't like doing this stuff, but someone has to do it. Someone has to do it. This is unreal. All right. So the Gifford fire, the firing operations are ongoing, and they're probably going to add a few thousand acres, probably like 3,000 or 4,000 acres to the total. The acreage doesn't really matter that much. As we saw earlier with the cost chart, with this one fire in Washington, $57 million. My God. Were they feeding these guys like filet mignon? Someone has to get the story on why the Poma's fire is so expensive. 3,000 acre fire, and we're spending $57 million on it. Why? What are they protecting? Is there some like secret biolab out there that's being threatened by this? And again, it's like, and again, what do we have as a result of that? Zero containment. What are we doing? Why are we spending $57 million on this? You know, it actually makes the Gifford fire not seem so bad, right? Because if we're spending $57 million on this 3,000 acre fire in Washington, well, shit, we're getting 120,000 acres for $84 million on the Gifford fire. I guess that's not so bad. But you know what? We're paying for Helislacker to play with his toys, with his balls. So we're paying $84.3 million so Helislacker can play with his balls. Good for him. Good for him, damn it. That's worth it. All right. Anyone have any more questions? Let's just look at the chat before we bounce. My theory, all these numbers are cooked to fit the books. There used to be truth and statistics. Everything is suspect. Dude, that is actually a very good point. Do we have the receipts for all this stuff? I'm not quite as concerned about the receipts on fire suppression because we can see the mechanism at work, right? You can see the planes flying. You can see how much retardant they're dumping. You can see the personnel. My question is, all this money that they're allocating for fuel treatment, where's that going? Where is that going? Because clearly the work is not getting done. It's not. So my question is, do we have the receipts on that? Right? They say that they're pouring billions of dollars into fuel treatment, yet they're only doing like 80,000 acres at most. And even that, they're like multiplying the numbers. They overcount it because they'll count the same plot multiple times. Where is all this money going, Lebowski? Where's the money, Lebowski? It's just like with everything else. It's just like with the homeless NPOs. Where's all that money going? It's not fixing the problem. All right, guys. That's enough of me ranting. I appreciate all your questions. Chat was active today. I love this. I love this. You guys rock. As always, hit me up with more questions. If I missed something or you want me to go more in depth on things, there's so much stuff that we can talk about. I try to keep it to just an hour, so I'm not taking too much of your time. But always hit me up in the comments and let me know if there's anything you want me to discuss. And if I'm at liberty to discuss said things, I will do it. There's other things that I'm requested to like keep on the down low for a while. I think a lot of times people are a little more scared than they should be, right? And I believe that the public has a right to know what their money is being used for. But everyone is like super tight butthole around this stuff, and I'm not 100% sure why. Like I said, you're going to get more information on the Palisades fire probably within the next 2 weeks. So I'm hopeful that before the end of the month, we can finally go public with some of this stuff. It's very frustrating to watch, and it's very frustrating how like government will freely take our tax dollars, but then doesn't allow us to like have the work product. It's really obnoxious, but it's because I guess better men are making decisions on my behalf, and they know better. So it's better they release it than some dork with a mustache on Twitter. All right, guys. I hope you have a lovely evening. Until next time, do it live.